Welcome to Ion Franchising, where you will learn the A to Z's of franchising. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Ion Franchising. I am your host, Lance Graulich. Well, I have, of course, another special guest today. He's a friend. He's a franchise expert, franchise consultant, but most important, he's a franchise finance expert. And boy, we can tell you stories I could tell you stories about our experiences thus far this year alone, which I think will come up today. But without further ado, my friend, Al Lesko. Al, welcome.
Hey, thank you very much, Lance. Appreciate being here, helping out any way I can.
Absolutely. Well, I'm so happy you are here, and our listeners are excited to hear about how you get financing for a franchise. So let's start off with the obvious, Al. Who is Al Lesko? And how did you get in the crazy world of franchising in the first place and finance altogether?
That's an interesting path, actually. I really cut my teeth in the automotive industry. And for many, many years, I was in that industry, ended up going to work for which is now the fifth largest chain of car dealerships publicly traded in the country. Worked in operations, really got to enjoy working with people. What I didn't like was working in a corporate environment, which we run across a lot with our clients, as you know. Absolutely. And, living out of a suitcase, the lifestyle wasn't there. And it became more and more important to me to leave that lifestyle and to yet have a lot of the benefits and the security of owning or being part of an organization like, publicly traded. So I think we run into that a lot. Long story short, I started looking for a business myself. Wasn't able to find what I was looking for in the area I lived in. Of course, I didn't have any idea what a franchise consultant was at that time, or that probably this path would have changed. Anyway,
Al, where were you living at that point?
I'm actually living in Medford, Oregon at that point, and I still live outside of Medford. But long story short, I became a franchise consultant and then eventually a franchise funding specialist. Because it was perfect. It fit my lifestyle. It fit what I was happy doing, which, is helping people, and also my background in being a problem solver.
Love it. Yeah, we do a lot of problem solving.
Sure we do.
So what fascinated you about franchising specifically?
As an operations guy, I like having a system that makes sense and going out and executing a plan. That's exactly what a franchise is. And at that point in my career, I was in my 40s. I didn't really want to reinvent the wheel. I had plenty of experience doing that in corporate America, but I wanted a plan that would allow me to go out and execute it and give me the lifestyle that I enjoy. So the business that I chose had to fit my lifestyle. Otherwise, I wouldn't enjoy doing it, which is what we talk about all the time.
Exactly. I was talking to an entrepreneur recently. I was on her podcast, and she was telling me she's super interested in a franchise now. And now that I've talked to her, but prior to that, she's like telling me how much money she spent over the years in her business. And it's an independent business. She started it. It's very successful, but how much time and money do people put into businesses? And they don't realize that is part of the huge value in franchising, is that somebody's spent all this time up at night trying to figure out how should this work? How can we invite other people to participate in this successful model and and partake in our success, so to speak. So modeling success, I always love to say, I don't know if that was Tony Robbins or whoever, but modeling success is absolutely crucial, and that is franchising. So tell me about.
I was going to expand on that for a second. I always tell a client the same thing. When it comes to a franchise, I mean, could you replicate what they do on that support side for the 4 to 8% you're paying in royalties? I mean, when you really value your time, you probably can't.
Yep. No, and that's the kicker. I mean, I have heard from quite a few people over the years, oh, franchising is expensive. So what do you mean by that? Because the idea behind franchising is, if you're doing a restaurant, someone has negotiated sort of a bulk deal where you shouldn't be able to get those certain, prices on your own versus joining a large corporation. And the other piece is obviously the royalties and the franchise fee and the setup. But you just said it, someone has figured this out. So you're paying a one-time franchise fee, although there are some renewals. I don't know how, renewal fees after 10 years or so. Not necessarily the full rate, right? What are we seeing? What are we seeing renewals? Sometimes just a partial little renewal fee, right?
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right.
And then in the royalties is really just the opportunity for the brand to make some money, but they still support you for those royalties, right?
That's exactly right. When you think about just if a client can actually focus on running their business and not having to worry about the back end of it. They have a good bookkeeper, a CPA at the end of the year. Everything else is really handled by the franchise as far as that support system, CRMs and reporting and even keeping up with the competition and having a competitive edge. I mean, it's amazing.
That's exactly right. I mean, Wendy's, as an example, came out with breakfast not too long ago.
Yeah.
Franchisees were not up at night coming up with recipes. Corporate came up with their own plan, coffee program. They're doing a biscuit, they're doing this, that, whatever, and it's been quite successful. It's nice to have those that revenue stream, I'm sure, if you're a Wendy's franchisee. So in the world of finance, let's talk about franchise finance. What do you do exactly? Of course, I know, but now we have to share this with the world.
Well, I think what I do more than anything else is educate clients about what opportunities are out there, get a feel for what they have, what they're trying to achieve, and match them correctly with the right lending option. I think that's probably more so than anything else. The other thing I do educate people on is not just getting finance to cover the cost of buying a business, but what's your 3-year plan, what's your 5-year plan, and what's your exit strategy? So we want to be able to make sure they're funded properly for that. So it may make a difference on how much money they put into it initially or not. We may say it might be better to take on more of a loan and hang on to more capital, depending on what their strategy and plan is going forward.
Well, Al, let's do a little role play. You just asked a hypothetical, which was, well, what is your 3-year plan? I'm gonna play along with you and say, well, Al, I don't know. What should my 3-year plan be? And let's talk about how you help them with that.
We do it every time. So when I talk to clients, say, okay, you're buying this business, and let's hypothetically say it's a service related business. I said, usually by the end of the 2nd year, you're going to be in a position, if you run your business correctly, to either maybe the terms are a little bit different. You might be able to rework your loan, or you may not like the business you're in. So when you're looking at a 3-year strategy, you should say, okay, I'm going to plan my business to say, if I like this business, I want to be in a situation where I can grow, maybe buy out a competitor, or maybe buy an additional territory, or I want to show enough profit on the books that I can get my return out of this business and then some. So we try to talk to them, say, what are your plans here? How long do you plan on holding on to this business? Is it a stepping stone? Is this your passion? We need to plan accordingly so I can tell you exactly how much to put in toward that business, how much you want to finance, and where you want to be in that 3-year period.
Great. So let's talk about what's the average loan these days? Not necessarily what's the average loan that you do, and what's the average, let's say, SBA loan?
Doing an awful lot of express loans, anywhere from 50 to 150,000. And then I'm doing a lot of loans that are in excess of 350,000. You're probably going to ask me, where's that gap, that 150 to 350? And
I was glad you asked or commented.
Let's put it this way. The banks are in the business to make money, and the work involved by the bank, once that loan exceeds 150, is as much for a $150,000 loan as it is for $1 million loan. So many banks, as per their policy, will only accept loans that are 350 above. Fortunately, and this kind of goes to something you were probably going to follow up on, this is why I work with so many different banks. They all have sweet spots, and finding a bank that likes a certain industry, likes to a loan amount that they like to to grant, and also the profile, the financial profile of the individual is very, very important. So I always tell clients the easiest loans to get are 50 to 150 and over 350,000 for those reasons.
Yeah. So on a $50,000 loan, let's play some examples, because I know listeners are thinking of this. They're thinking, okay, how do I get a $50,000 loan? What are typically the requirements that you're asking somebody for when they want a $50,000 loan?
Sure. We go into a packaging thing, but we tell them to get the basics initially. The first thing we tell them is we want a complete credit report. We like to have them pull either Experian, TransUnion, or Equifax. If they don't want to do that, I actually have a soft pull credit link that will not affect their credit. So we're going to do that. We're going to make sure that they have their credit cards paid down to 35% or less relative to the credit card limits, each card. We're going to want them to prepare a resume. We're going to have them fill out a personal financial statement. We're going to want to see how much money they have coming in as far as income coming in, which is not necessarily a deal breaker in getting a loan, but we want to see. They can count total household income. In other words, if they have a spouse or significant other, that all can be counted and they don't have to be on the loan. And then finally, we're going to say, okay, let's put this together and say you're going to need to put in 11.1% into the business to get a $50,000 loan. So that means $50,000 loan, the bank will grant, you got to show where you put $5,555 in. The banks additionally are asking for a $50,000 or 20%, whatever's greater reserve amount, which can come in the way of just showing statements for cash, bank statement, IRA, 401k, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, heck, even gold and silver if you can show the work. That's just to give that bank some warm and fuzzy that say, if something goes wrong, these people can liquidate some funds and make sure they make their loan payments.
Yeah. And even if something doesn't go wrong, you mentioned the business plan earlier. As part of any business plan, I know as a franchise consultant like you do that every single person that's looking at a franchise, the question comes up, regardless of their business experience, when am I going to start making money?
Yeah, cash flow.
So what is the cash flow normally? What is the ramp up period? I have a franchise brand that's in real estate, and they brag, it's true, that the average investment is only $42,000 and the average franchisee gets that $42,000 back within 120 days. So if you are counting on that, or in your business plan, worst case scenario, you get it back in 7 months or 8 months. It's always good to plan very, very conservatively. I'm sure you'd recommend.
That's right.
Because cash is king. And as you're saying, everybody needs working capital in their deals, no matter what, because nobody comes out of the gate making money.
Well, the banks insist upon it. If you go to them and say, if you want all this money, they'll say, well, what's the use of funds for? And if you don't list that you're going to have working capital, they're going to insist and say, well, we're going to loan you 25,000 more because you don't have working capital listed in your use of fund, which is something we review. We prep that when we do the preparation before we put a loan in front of the bank. We're going to put it in front of the right bank. We're going to make sure that the packaging is correct. And we're going to do, checking off all the boxes to make sure that the client is prepared. And that's exactly what the bank wants to see, that particular bank, because each bank is different.
No, I love it. That's a perfect example. So the 5,000 down, 5,500 in this example to get, 50,000, and then having that reserve capital, which the bank obviously wants you to have on hand in the event you're going to need it. Hopefully you don't need it.
Well, you said something about the cash flow too. The banks are going to look at the FDD, franchise disclosure document, and they're going to see what the cash flow is. And we're going to put that in those projections. And we do help clients with projections, because a new client, especially, I think we've talked about this before.
Yep.
A franchise can only disclose so much based upon what's in their franchise disclosure document. But me as an operations guy and knowing what the bank is looking for, we help them with their projections, and we guide them by talking to franchisees, showing them good resources where they can gather that information. And then we're going to look at it to make sure this is what the bank would be looking for, and yet be realistic in what it is.
Absolutely. So walk us through, let's say the next step up, $150,000 SBA express loan.
Basically the same thing. On an express loan of 150, basically all it really changes is there are some additional fees because of the size of the loan, as far as bank fees at closing, but they have to put 11.1% in. So that equates to $16,667.
Love how you know it off the top of your head. You've done this before.
Once or twice. And, same thing, 50,000 in reserve. They're going to look at the cash flow, and we're going to make sure. And again, one thing a lot of people don't know, the bank, when they're doing projections, or when the bank looks at projections, they're looking to see if the client is going to take a salary. And if they're not going to take a salary, they're going to make sure that the net profit at the bottom of the spreadsheet is going to be at least twice what they're doing in loan payments. So, so that's your debt service coverage. That's a bare minimal. If you don't have that in the plan, you're not going to get a bank loan.
Right. Right. Like everything, it has to make sense. Similar process, I would imagine, when you go through a mortgage. People want to make sure in this scenario that it looks like you can take care of this.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So what are the sort of exceptions? So walk us through, these were just SBA examples. So walk us through the non-SBA examples, because there are quite a few lenders that I have that are great SBA lenders. One of the many reasons that I like you a lot is, besides your personality, of course, and your brains, is the fact that you work with a lot of different banks and you have a lot of different options at your disposal. You have that fancy tool belt that Batman has, depending on what you need, right? Your utility belt.
Well, I think, having the experience with what you do and what's important, our main goal is to take care of the client. That becomes our priority. So having those connections, and one of the things that, there's a lot of SBA lenders out there. There's what they call loan brokers, which I am not. But our unique niche is, and I call myself a franchise funding strategist, because that's really what I do. But my relationships are direct relationships with the banks. And I know you want to talk about other alternatives, but
that's okay.
We do work with directly with the decision makers at the banks, and the banks that we work with are banks that actually fund the loan. That's very important, because you mentioned mortgage earlier, and I wanted to touch on that. It's not like that loan is just going in, or somebody's going to another bank and the other bank's going to fund it. Back to the options. We also offer the IRA 401k rollover program, which can be used in conjunction with an SBA loan. And there's some huge benefits to that if you work the strategy right. It's not right for everyone. I would say it's right for most. We also do personal and business funding as well from a private source. The terms are a little bit less. The interest rates are a little higher, but they're a little easier to get, much quicker. And usually the size of the loans are a little bit smaller than what's available with an SBA. But again, we walk through all of those options with the client. We're going to look at the cash flow of the business that they're looking for. In other words, when is that business going to be able to cover its own debt? In other words, it doesn't necessarily mean the owner's salary, but we want to make sure that it can cover all of the expenses, monthly expenses, because that's what we need for the working capital part of it. Right. We're also going to look at the FDD and say, okay, in that item 7, minimum investment, maximum investment, what part of the country are they in? So in other words, what's their cost of living? All of those are going to go into that decision. Then we're going to start talking about, maybe we should use an IRA 401k to be the initial part or part of the investment, and an SBA, and you hang on to your own cash, because you mentioned it earlier. Cash is king. If you need to go and get more cash, you just simply go to the bank. If you have an SBA loan, you can't do that because you've already received that loan, and the bank's going to be suspicious. Why are you looking for another loan? Typically, they won't lend until they see 2 years of positive cash flow out of that business.
Yeah, no, it's all great stuff. Tell us, walk us through the story. I sent you a young lady recently, and to my knowledge, I think it's the first time I heard of anybody truly getting a zero down franchise deal done, and you did it.
Well, Rumpelstiltskin deal. Let's just put it to you that way. Turn it straw into gold. So no, she really had good credit. She just didn't quite have the capital to qualify for an SBA loan. She didn't have the reserve. And then we started looking and said, gosh, great credit score, good credit history, has income coming in. I go, this is a perfect candidate for a personal loan. So we're a private label partner of a couple of lenders that do private loans and business loans as well. So we looked at the profile, we ran it, we got an estimate about how much we think she would qualify for, walked her through the scenario, said, hey, this loan's going to be a little bit shorter. It's going to be in a 5 to 7 year term. And, there's a cost of money. The closing costs are all going to be back ended a loan. You can pay it off at any time without any penalty. And we were able to get her the money she needed.
Yeah, and she was so happy. I was talking to the brand on a regular basis. And they're like, we love her. Is the financing any closer? I said, well, let me check in with Al. And it was a process. And
Always.
boy, oh boy, was she happy. Her husband was happy. And her husband's like, they both told me she was working at a school. And like a lot of people that I think you and I like to call corporate refugees.
Yes.
They have some sort of corporate job. That's essentially what it felt like to me. She had this job at a school where she just didn't like it. The admin wasn't really doing maybe what was best for kids and all that. And she was just happy to get into her own thing and control her own destiny. And her husband kept thanking me profusely. So, we always say in the hashtag world, hashtag changing lives. And
Yep.
That's really what this one was all about, especially. So hats off to you and all your hard work. So, in the world of franchising, seeing all the things that you've seen, knowing that there are people listening, they might be experienced entrepreneurs out there and first-time entrepreneurs, but, what are your tips, seeing all the things that you've seen over the years, to prepare people for a franchise in general?
Well, in general, I like to say there's 3 reasons that drive somebody to buy a business, right? They're either, let's just put an empire builder. I would consider myself an empire builder.
Yep.
They're possibly passionate about a particular industry that they really want to pursue. And then, of course, the other one is the lifestyle. I think everybody is all 3 of those at some degree. The key is identifying what's most important of those 3 to the individual. Rank them 1, 2, and 3.
Yep.
That starts there because now have a starting point, for a guy like you that can look at this and say, okay, these are the priorities that a client's looking for. And then in the same respect, I know what kind of financing is going to be most appropriate for them based upon what they have, whether we're going to go bank, whether we're going to go, private, or if we're going to do an IRA 401k rollover. What are they trying to achieve? Not just now, but especially when we run into people like in their 40s and say, they're thinking of retirement, even though they've got 20, 25 years still to work. And we want to position them. We want to talk about that and say, how would you like to set up? I'm sure you run across this. I'm going to lose my benefits if I leave corporate America, or I'm not going to have an IRA or 401k, or I can't contribute like I did when I'm working for someone else. And we cover that. So you absolutely can. There's options to do this. Let's talk about your plan. So my tip is always to prepare a client and say, I want you to go back and think about what you really want to achieve past just buying a particular brand and leaving corporate America. I want to know what you want to do.
One of the things that always, I guess, surprises me a little bit is when I talk to people that have never investigated having their own business, let alone a franchise, they have not really talked to their tax person, accountant, depending on who's specifically doing their taxes, because I remind them of a story when I was a first-time entrepreneur a long time ago. I'll never forget when I called my CPA, who was also my tax person, and I said, Anthony, I'm taking a lot of money out of the business. You told me to take money as I need it, but what about the taxes? And he goes, Lance, you own a business now. You have write-offs. He says, you're not going to even be paying, you're not going to pay any federal taxes this year at all because you have a restaurant. You have all these depreciable assets. Like, why didn't I do this a long time ago? Because, you don't need as much income as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, than you do maybe as a W-2 employee. You're in a higher tax bracket, right?
Oh, that's absolutely true. And I mean, you think about, I mean, you have a home office, you got to be able to write off some expenses. You've got a vehicle that should be going underneath the business, your cell phone, which, everybody these days, everything you do in business is tied to your cell phone. That should be run through the business. So when you really think about it, and actually, when we talk to clients about this, if you're making $100,000, you're actually making more if you net $75,000 in the business that you invested. I mean, you're going to have actually more money in your pocket and pay less taxes.
Exactly. This is exactly what I've experienced, and I have to remind people of this. Let's talk about mindset. Prior to going live here, we talked about this briefly. I run into clients all of the time that are scared out of their minds. Mm-hmm. They've gotten a paycheck. They've collected a paycheck as a corporate person or a jobber doing whatever over the years, and you get really comfortable. And doing your own thing is obviously different. Do you have any tips or tricks to help people with their mindset?
Yeah, I talked to them about that. Goes really to the cash flow of the business they're going to be looking at. And I'll just give them my personal experience. I said, for me personally, it doesn't matter what the business is, as long as it's honest and ethical. It can allow me to do what I want to do, which is my fun time is whitewater rafting, fly fishing, whatever the case may be.
Look where you are, Al.
There you are. I can't make a living at that, but the business that I invest in has to allow me to do that, and I'll enjoy it. Therefore, if I need a paycheck, and I'm using the client as an example right away, I am going to highly recommend that they look at the service-related industries, because they don't carry cash flow. They have income coming in almost immediately. They're always in demand. You can always sell them. There's always an audience to sell them, and the banks love them. So if cash flow is important, and if they're really worried about that, say, find something that's going to fit your lifestyle in a service-related industry. It's the least amount of risk, quickest to cash flow, and the easiest to get rid of if you don't like it.
Yeah, such great advice, Al. Let's talk about the pre-approval process.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously I send people as early on as possible to you for pre-approval. Mm-hmm. What is your any thoughts on that process? Talk a little bit about how that works. Is it a hard pull, a soft pull when you look at credit? And because people want to know, well, how do I get pre-approved? Because like a mortgage, you don't go shopping for houses and dragging real estate people all over the world or your city looking at homes unless you're pre-approved. Franchising is sort of like that and should be like that. But I'm happy to talk to people because I'm not, I'm virtual. Nobody knows where I am. I'm not actually showing them the franchises standing next to them. But I always encourage people to get financing right away because I don't want them to be disappointed. I had a couple recently, Al. I didn't go through you with this. I mean, they already had somebody in mind and they didn't get their financing tidied up. They came to me looking at a restaurant. And then I said, do I have permission to show you something that I think fits you better, even though hubby has restaurant experience? They said, well, sure, you're the expert, Lance. Show us what you think fits us. And it happened to be a restoration brand that fit them perfectly. And she had an accounting background and saw the numbers in the FDD and her eyes almost popped out of her head, I'm sure. And she's like, oh, this is the one for us. Well, the financing hadn't been nailed down yet. So it was a big stress in the end. They finally figured it out. It got done. They were self-funding. But tell us a little bit about how you handle the pre-approval process. And again, advice for people on pre-approval and how to go about financing.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. We look at each case by case basis because we want to see what their liquidity is, most importantly, because just going back to the one loan, let's say for $150,000, franchise fees can be anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000, maybe even more in some cases for the franchise fee. So it may not be in their best interest to pay that 50,000 because that could affect them getting a loan, a pre-approval, if you will. So we're going to look at that. And that's one of the reasons we ask for that personal financial statement. So we can see what they have and we can give them a strategy, say, okay, if you put 17,000 in, we want you to keep the rest of your cash over here because it gives you a better profile to the bank as far as liquidity.
Yeah.
And then I'll say anything you pay for out of pocket prior to the loan closing, you can't use the funds from the SBA loan to reimburse yourself. So therefore, we're going to talk about a strategy of saying, well, let's look at that item 7 and let's see where that gap is. And let's see what those things that aren't paid by invoice, we'll ask for a higher amount of that. So on the pre-approval thing, that's one of the things we talk about. We talk about their credit cards, paying that stuff down. We talk about a review of going over it. Let me look at it so I can see if there's anything in there. The other thing is a good resume. All I tell them is a lot of people haven't written a resume. Hell, I've only had 3 jobs in my whole life, you know? So having a resume that's prepared is all they're looking for is to see what your experience in managing people is or has been. So we want to talk about that. We also tell them that how that process works. Pre-approval is kind of a weird term. We call it pre-screening because we know what bank is looking for what. And once we know that we have all that information packaged and I take it to a bank, that's really what my job is to find the right bank. Sometimes I got to go to 3 or 4 different banks to find the right bank without them running their credit. So that's the purpose of getting that pre-screen and also getting the pre-approval and also the credit pull. Do a soft pull. So now I can go to those lending officers, those VPs, and say, here's the profile of the client. They've got everything in place. Hey, it's a slam dunk. This is perfect for your bank. I've got to go and lobby. And when I lobby, they're got to go and lobby, and they might have to talk to the VP in the credit department and say, this is a loan we want to take on. Well, the other thing that people don't realize is things change at a bank. A lot of times you're going to have turnover of personnel. They're also going to see how the loans are performing at the bank. The bank's never going to tell you that we've got some loans that aren't doing so well.
Right.
And if they are, maybe I don't want to put that loan in front of that bank or the bank might say, you know what, we're not going to take this on where they had in the past. So having that financial strategist and that person that's doing that for you, as opposed to, well, I'll call it a pump and dump, a loan broker that pumps up what they can do and just dumps it on a bank is very important. So that pre-approval and that pre-screening is all about preparation and putting your plan together and sticking to the plan once you get that pre-screen letter back from the bank. Many times a franchise will ask me for that letter before that, and I'll say, look, if I have all this stuff written down, I'll write that letter because I know that I can get it through the bank. I don't fund a loan, but what happens is I can say, I feel confident about this. The bank's going to take a look at this and say, yes, go ahead and proceed with your client.
Yeah, that's great. That's all great information. So I want to ask you about industry. There are so many people that ask me or say to me, I hear the statement often, but Lance, I have no experience in that industry, fill in the blank. So if I show somebody a flooring franchise, well, Lance, I've never been a contractor. If I show them a painting franchise, I've never been in the painting business. Now, we all know, well, you and I know that in the world of franchising, that's why franchising can be and is so successful, is that you can take somebody that was smart, is smart, successful in virtually anything. Doesn't matter what they did. I have a lady that's in the hospitality business. She can jump into the painting business very easily because she has customer service ability and some sort of good communication skills, et cetera. So what is your thought process on that? How much of that plays in? I would imagine for some brands, there are lenders that prefer somebody to have more direct related experience, and in other cases, not.
I would say, with the exception of the restaurant industry, if the person has experience managing people, has a very good, strong resume as far as success, it doesn't have to be a high paying job. They just have to have success and longevity and prove that. it's not that much of a factor. Now, they will put some emphasis on the strength of the franchise itself, as far as, franchises that have more than 50 units are going to get more preference than one that has maybe 2 or 3 units open. But short of that, not really. Where it comes to play, and this is very important, one of the things that we do, and again, I'm not trying to self-promote here, but throughout the process, we're with that client when they're working with the bank. I always tell the clients, anytime the bank asks you any questions, your simple answer is, if you don't know, let me get with a franchisor, let me get with my franchise consultant, and let me get with Al, because we've all worked on this together and I just want to compare our notes.
Yep.
One of the things that sometimes an underwriter will do is they'll challenge a client about how much they know and how much they put in, which goes to a business plan that they just take. It hasn't been customized and they don't understand it for their market area or your projections. So we do the coaching on that. So we'll coach a client before they're going into underwriting and say, okay, let's go over your projections. Where did this number come from? Where did that come from? Let me look at your business plan if it's necessary for loans over 150, and say, all right, I think I would make a couple of corrections here. That's what we do. And I think that makes all the difference in the world, all the difference in the world.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, that's fantastic information. And you brought up something, everything, you're dropping all kinds of good knowledge here on everybody. One of the things you just said that is so important is exactly what I look at on a regular basis, depending on the candidate and what their experience is. If they're not as experienced, or they're super nervous, or their mindset isn't perfect yet, it's their first time they're looking, but I know they're ready to make that move financially and otherwise, I am going to recommend a stronger brand, to your point, that is going to support the heck out of them, that has amazing training and mentorship programs, as opposed to some brands you and I know that they might perform well, but got to be a much stronger candidate because you're not going to get as much support.
I think that's well said. I really do, Lance, because that is really what the banks are looking for. They're trying to mitigate risk. I think what people forget is they think the SBA is loaning the money. It isn't. It's the bank that's loaning the money, and the SBA is backing the loan.
Right. How much plays in, if a franchise brand is not performing as well as they should, and maybe they've had a franchisee they took on in the system that didn't do well, I would imagine that gets flagged pretty quickly. And, when you go into underwriting or something, they're like, pick another brand.
Yeah. It's interesting. I actually have a client of mine, a longtime friend, and you mentioned a franchise consultant. I'm working with him. I mean, he's got the financials. He doesn't have the income coming in. So this is a perfect example here, but he's got a strong industry with a new franchise that only has a couple units open. Now, I've had a couple banks say no, but then I've had another bank look at that and say, wow, look at the owners of this franchise. Look at their experience in this. And then look at the financials of this individual. Even though they're not working, he's got enough money that he could support himself for 4 years. And this business shows cash flow in month 5. So there's one that will get through. So it's knowing those little tricks.
Exactly. Now that's a perfect story. I love that response because that's what it is. It's not that easy. A lot of people go searching for a business. They can't sleep at midnight. They start hunting and pecking on their keyboard and Googling all these different franchise brands. And the reality is, franchise consultants like me and you, we work for free essentially because
we really do.
Yeah. And you don't pay anything. The commission that you pay, or I should say the franchise fee that you pay when you invest in a franchise, is going to be the same regardless. This isn't like real estate where you get to save your commission if you avoid an agent. Franchising is not like that. So some people are really strange. They're like, what do you mean? I get a free advocate? Yeah, you do. You do.
Well, and no disrespect to franchises themselves, but the reality is they're in the business of selling franchises. And in some cases, if somebody were to go on their own, they're going to be talking to a lower level person, maybe just somebody that's new in sales that is handling incoming leads. Whereas you're talking to somebody with your experience, that doesn't have a vested interest in any one particular brand. Your vested interest is helping the client get what they need and what they want and be happy about that, because those in turn become referrals for you in the future. So
Absolutely.
it's crazy. In my opinion, if I had the opportunity to work with a franchise consultant before I bought my first franchise, it would have been fantastic. I can't be a bigger advocate for it.
Me too. Yeah, it didn't even really exist all those years ago that I knew.
Nope.
This has been fantastic. You've given a ton of great information. Al, any final tips for today? Anything we didn't cover you'd like to share?
I can't think of anything in particular other than, you know what, trust your franchise consultant, trust your funding source. And if there's one thing that I've run across in the year that has been a little bit challenging, is a lot of times you'll get a franchise rep that does push too hard. Oh, don't go with that guy, go with my guy. And that is the worst thing that a client can do. They need to trust their franchise consultant. They need to follow the plan as far as what the franchise strategist or franchise funding strategist has done, because it's outlined to work. Anything deviating from that could mess it all up.
Yeah.
That's what I would leave it with.
Well, Al, it's been an absolute pleasure having you. I'm glad we got to spend some time together, and we'll see you next time. I'm sure there'll be a part 2 in the future.
Oh, that'd be great. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks.
Thanks everyone for tuning in, and thank you, Al. Thank you very much for listening today. Please like, follow, and subscribe. This is Lance Graulich. Until next time.